Welcome to On the Chain for a very special debate to Smashdown. John Deaton versus the fake Indian Elizabeth Warren. And what a what a debate it was last time. Today we are going to witness part two of that rematch. And man, I am excited about watching this. I got to tell you, I was excited to see some of the national coverage that John Deaton got, especially with some of the beatdown. Benny Johnson did a nice he put a nice thing on YouTube saying about the it was about the Epstein thing when he called her on the Epstein thing, and he showed her face side by side, and she was like a little bit worried. She showed up, thought she could say two things last time: Trump, 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 and the playbook, right? The Republican playbook, and then the third part of it was what was the third thing? I don't know. It's the same. It's the same rhetoric, but John shut her up pretty early on and realized that she's not going to be getting away with that. So everyone's talking about this appeal, and here's what I say: who cares about the appeal? It has nothing to do with the ruling. XRP is not a security. This is a squabble between a company, a centralized company called Ripple, which makes software that sells it to banks, and it's about programmatic sales. They're not even disputing the judgment or disgorgement. There's none of that stuff. They're talking about both of the both Garlinghouse and Larson aiding and abetting. Has nothing to do with us. Nobody cares. It means nothing. It's a private squabble between a centralized organization, and it does not affect the decentralized XRP. I could care less. I didn't care about the appeal. I didn't care if it got filed. I didn't care if it got filed late. I don't care if the court case goes for another 2 years. Don't care. It has nothing to do with XRP. It's not a security. It's the only digital asset aside from Bitcoin that has that designation. All right, guys, let's go. We are 3 minutes in counting here. Let's do this. Let's get this up here. Here we go. We've got 3 minutes. There's the countdown timer right there in the corner. As soon as this puppy goes live. Uh-oh, hang on a second. I just remembered that I cannot share that like that, or we will not have audio. So I must go ahead and share that screen a different way. There it is. Make sure that the audio tab is, and if there's no audio, you guys will let me know. I know that is a fact. Okay. G'day, champions. What's going down? Ed is in the house down with OTC. Who's ready for some more elder abuse? Yeah, Grandma wishes she was back there knitting a sweater or making some cookies at some point. It was getting ugly fast. I mean, my God. Vane Lang says Deaton dominated the first one. Can't wait for tonight's. Almost home to tune in. Good to hear that. Matt Morrow, totally agree. The question is the bottom of page one date says 16th of October. Filing date says 17th of October. Probably some sloppy work. That's what you can expect from the SEC. Time to frame and disgrace. We have a deal regarding this pathetic government. Agree with that. In the meantime, the price, it doesn't matter, dude. This I got news for you. This court case will end and nothing will happen. Zero. Go ahead and bet on it. The bull market will run when the bull market goes. When Bitcoin and Ethereum start making the move, it'll drag all the altcoins with it because that's the only thing that's ever worked. Now, something may change that. It's doubtful, and a court case has zero bearing on that, right? It's not gonna make a difference. That's just my hit the like, please. Is crypto 6 foot? What time does it start? It starts in 1 minute and 20 seconds, and I will shut up. I'll try to keep my mouth closed. Sound is good. Yeah, sound is good for now, but I mean when I play the video, when I actually start playing the video, because it's weird. Today it's by this is GBH News. I don't know what GBH News is. Oh, it's public media. Public media and GBH okay, so it's actually airing on YouTube here. I don't know. It was hard to find, man. I had to really look out for it. Wasn't that easy to see? Yo, Sean Thompson in the house. Matt Morrow says he agrees 100%. Beautiful. Steve Willits. How many times you reckon she's going to say, I don't understand what you mean by that? If she knows what's good for her, probably plenty, right? I mean, it's funny. Jay was saying about it last night. Jay was talking about the fact that these Democrats all sound the same, and he's super spot on there. They all sound like they're like the same drama, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what you mean. I don't know. What do you mean? I don't know. No, I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody knows anything. It's exactly what it is. Yeah, happy to have you here, Blue Lotus. Adrian. Oh, hang on a second. We're waiting here. Let's see what's going on. It says waiting for GBH News. Hopefully they start this thing. What's going on, guys? It says waiting for GBH News. I hope they start it. London is in the building. All right, London. It's late there, man. Let's make a bet how many times. Oh, here we go, guys. Here we go. NCI test in Spanish. I'm not watching it in Spanish. What in the hell? En español, no thanks. Sorry. What's going on, guys? There's no sound. I don't even hear any sound. Do you guys hear sound? Okay, here we go. Let's see. I don't hear sound, guys. I don't know what's going on, but I don't hear any sound. There's no sound. What in the hell, people? Let me try refreshing this page to see what happens, but there's no sound. There is no sound. No sound. Subscribe online. Subscribers in 5 minutes or more. You had to subscribe. Oh God. Well, this is great. There's no sound. This has got off to a really great start. Well done. XRP plumbing list with John Deaton. I don't hear any sound, guys. I don't know what the deal is. Just don't know. This is sad. Sorry, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I don't hear any sound. There's nothing. No sound is coming across. So, what a pain in the ass. Stupid people. God Almighty, this is ridiculous. Hang on a second. Let me stop sharing this. There is no freaking sound coming through this. Why is there no sound? Yeah. Okay, good. It's not just me. People are complaining about the sound also, guys. So hang on a second. They'll probably get this resolved pretty shortly. Share screen. Let's do this again. It's not just us. They're also talking about no sound on the feed. Yep. Everybody's saying the same thing. There's no sound. Okay, it's not us. So look at that feeble little old lady. A little breath of air and she'll crumble. All right, so let's at least look at the caption so we can read what's going on. Senator Warren, start with you. The bill had no supporters, big supporters here in Massachusetts, with your Governor Ursula, President and House Speaker, and Democrats, them going back to the bill, have criticized applicants for opposing it to help Donald Trump. But you were aligned with Republicans and you've opposed the bill. Why? And I don't know. Apparently the captions aren't working for her. Remember the time we pulled the bill, the reason we had killed it was really important. He wanted to preserve it as an election issue. Here she goes into her bullshit again. He was afraid that if we actually worked together and got something done, that it would, this is not what happened. This is so ridiculous. Reading it over and over again in elections. I get it. We're in a crisis on immigration, but that means we need serious people proposing serious solutions. We need to know what immigration reform, but instead, here's where we are. By the way, there's been a bill that was passed that's been sitting there for a year that closes the border. John Deaton over there does this over and over again. You have public in Massachusetts that if it's a healthcare, blame the immigrants, and if it's housing, blame the immigrants. Blame the immigrants, because that is not going to address the problems and the solutions we have in this state. So for me, I have no one's. Gosh, let me see. You can listen to the sound here. What a bunch of assholes. My God, these people are stupid. This is what happens when you have public radio. All right, so maybe I can do is I can listen to the sound on this. Hang on a second. Let me figure this out. Is this playing? Let's see. Is this doing something? Nope. Where's the sound? No, there's no sound. This is ridiculous. These people are not bright people. I know you guys are watching that, but I can't. Yeah, there's no sound in either place. This is ridiculous, man. These people are stupid. This is what you have. This is Massachusetts for you, man. This is why John needs to be in office to fix all this stuff. Everything's broken in Massachusetts. Video doesn't work. Sound doesn't work. It's all broken. 12 million immigrants have crossed in. They run. They wait. They get picked up. They have no idea. And then when they are let go, they're given a court date in 2032. Not exaggerating. 8 or 9 years from now. There's 100 terrorists.
400 to 500 are estimated from Iran, from Hezbollah, from Russia and China. It's a national security crisis, but it's a humanitarian crisis. No one can identify with these migrants more than me. I come from
You
extreme
guys hear sound?
poverty. I know what it's like to want a better life. But here's the issue for Senator Warren. She blames it on Donald Trump. Senator, I got news for you. You had a vote. Donald Trump did not, and you voted no. And now Senator Warren is saying, oh, I'll look at another immigration reform bill. Vice President Harris said she will bring back the same exact bill, and Senator Warren still won't vote for it because she's not here enough to know the damage it's doing to this state.
Coming back to you, Senator Warren, a quick follow-up. I just want to note that a recent Suffolk University and Boston Globe poll showed that more than a fifth of likely voters here in Massachusetts do blame Congress for the state's emergency shelter system being put under strain. They also say they blame Congress for now the state being on track to spend more than $1 billion this fiscal year. I understand that the bill was a sinking ship, but if it had come down to your vote, would you have been for or against it?
That's the point. It didn't come down to my vote. Because here's the deal. The Republicans sunk the comprehensive immigration reform back in 2013. The bill that was led by Marco Rubio, Republican, I voted for that bill, and we got enough people together to do comprehensive immigration reform. And what happened? It went over to the House, and extremist Republicans said, no, we want to keep this as an election issue. It's exactly what Donald Trump did in 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024. Yes, we need comprehensive immigration reform, but we need to negotiate a bill that actually gives that to us and that doesn't let extremist Republicans continue to block actually making change in this area. Look, Mr. Deaton wants to talk about drug cartels. He wants to talk about Iran terrorists. But what he doesn't want to talk about is one way that we could actually help cabin that some, and that is to put rules in place on crypto that are actually used by the drug traffickers, the terrorists, and Iran.
Senator,
all of the bad guys.
Mr. Deaton.
I hope I get the same amount of time. Listen, you know, to the voters out there, Senator Warren in the last two debates is talking about 2013 and Marco Rubio, and she voted for some bill a decade ago. Senator, the voters need a senator today. They don't need a senator reminiscing about some vote that didn't actually happen and get passed in 2013. So listen, the bottom line for everybody out there is Senator Warren has the same exact position as Donald Trump. Do nothing. And here's what I want the voters to know, that the bill was not perfect. I can assure you that. It was horrible. I'd like to see more. I want to see legal immigration expanded more and then have a zero tolerance for illegal immigration. But Senator Warren is so extreme, she objects to President Biden placing a $2,500 per cap per day. She doesn't want that. She supports open borders because she doesn't know our airports, our train stations, our ERs, our urgent cares, everything's being maxed and stressed out. And Senator Warren's not here enough to know that. She should answer the question now. If Vice President Harris said she's going to bring back the same exact bill, Senator, will you vote for it?
Look, if it's the same exact bill, then I'll certainly take a hard look at it, especially if it's not already dead. But understand this, when a bill is already dead, part of what you do when you vote is you're signaling where you want to go on the negotiations. I made clear in every speech I gave, in every time I talked about this, that it is not enough to do half of it. We also need, if we're going to do this, to do it right, we need full reimbursement for what the states are spending, and we need to make sure we have a pathway to citizenship. If you're going to negotiate for that, then you got to be in there willing to negotiate.
Senator Warren, that's time. Mr. Deaton, we have a lot to get to.
No, I know, but let me just add.
We're going to move along. We have a lot to get to.
We do have to, forgive me, Mr. Deaton, the next question heads to you. You suggested, this is something you want to talk about, I know, from the last debate. In the last debate with Senator Warren, you suggested that the aid that the United States has provided in connection with the war in Ukraine, nearly $200 billion, would have been better spent on domestic priorities. But if we had gone that route, wouldn't it have guaranteed that Russia would have taken over Ukraine? And wouldn't it have put a number of countries in Eastern Europe, many of which are our allies, at grave risk moving forward?
To the voters out there, Ukraine war is the single biggest issue in this election, period. One mistake and we're at World War III. Listen, I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years. I taught generals and admirals at the Naval War College. And as a military trained officer, I can't tell you what our plan is in Ukraine because I don't think we have a plan. One day they tell us no American-made missile will land in Russia. The next week they tell us that might happen. Vladimir Putin says if it does happen, then it's war and nuclear options are on the table. This is frightening. We spent $200 billion and it's a stalemate at best. And many people believe that Russia is winning, and you can see it on Zelensky's face when he's here begging for more money. Look, my vote will have to be earned like any other vote. And of course, I favor democracy, but we got to know what the plan is. And to the warmongers in Washington saying Ukraine's going to win is a plan, that's not a plan. That's a hope. That's a wish. $200 billion. We would have had universal pre-K for the country for 10 years and 50 billion left off. We could have spent Medicaid money and expanded Medicaid in the states that didn't adopt it, giving millions of more people health insurance for 20 years. Okay, you know, it's been 30 years since Tupac said it, but I'm going to say it now. They got money for war, but can't feed the poor.
Damn,
Senator Warren, you have
Tupac,
90
baby.
seconds.
So keep in mind that what Mr. Deaton has already said is that he would not fund Ukraine. Look, I sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I have been to Ukraine. I have met more than once with President Zelensky. The Ukrainians are fighting the frontline war for democracy. Anyone who thinks that we can turn just our backs on Ukraine and that Vladimir Putin won't take the whole country, and after he takes that country, take another and another and another, is just kidding themselves. I want to give real credit here actually to Joe Biden, because he's somebody who pulled together all of the nations of Europe to say we are going to support Ukraine, because we understand that if Putin takes Ukraine, he's coming for Poland, he's coming for Estonia, he is coming for the other nations in Europe. We are a partner for Ukraine as they fight for democracy. And I think that's powerfully important. You know, this is the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are these handful of Republicans who've turned their backs on Ukraine? And the answer is because Donald Trump is still angry with Ukraine because Ukraine wouldn't help him try to dig up dirt on Joe Biden back when Donald Trump was president. Remember that originally the Republicans were all in for Ukraine. And then this extremist group broke off and said, no, 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 Donald Trump doesn't like it, so they want to turn their backs on a nation that's an ally.
We have to leave it there with you at the moment. But Mr. Deaton, just to be clear, if you were elected to the Senate, would you be a no vote on any future considerations of aid for Ukraine?
No, I didn't say that. I said my vote has to be earned. Her vote is taken for granted. I want to know what the plan is, just so the American people know this. In the first month of the invasion, Vladimir Putin was willing to back out, go back to Russia, as long as Zelensky agreed that Ukraine would not enter NATO. Why was that deal turned down? Why was it turned down? Now, I don't have the briefings that Senator Warren's getting, but I want to know what the plan is. All I'm saying is the American people deserve to know what the plan is. And just coming back every 6 months and giving billions and billions and billions of dollars when people can't pay their rent. I just want to know the plan, and no one is articulating the plan. The American people deserve transparency. For 50 plus years, it wasn't in America's vital interest for Ukraine to be in NATO. Why is it so important today? I want that answer. Maybe the senator can share with us why it is so vital in America's interest that we need to be, that Ukraine needs to be a member of NATO.
30 seconds for the last word on this.
So let's be clear. Mr. Deaton has already been quoted in the press saying that he will not support funding for Ukraine.
That's not true.
Well, that's what the press has said.
Well,
but
find it now.
He says he wants to know the plan, then we'll make the plan clear. And that is, we are going to push back and fight back against Vladimir Putin's invasion of a neighbor. This is a violation of international law. And if Mr. Deaton wants to be an appeaser, then he can take that label. but we stand up and fight back for the boundaries that exist, and we
Senator,
do not support
Mr.
Vladimir
Deaton.
Putin taking over Ukraine.
We have to move on to the next question.
We're going to move on to a different topic, and one that's of local importance here in Western Massachusetts. A long talked about issue here is east-west or west-east rail, expanded passenger rail service between Boston and the western part of the state. Some people say this would provide not just transportation options, but also could unlock jobs and housing opportunities as well. Senator, I'll start with you first for the next 90 seconds. If you're reelected, what will you do to help make this a reality?
So I am all in on east-west rail. I think it will fundamentally transform not just the economy in Western Mass, but for every part of Massachusetts. Look, I'll tell you what it's going to take to get it done. I work with Richie Neal on this, and we are now laying the foundation for this. We've been working on this for years. But here's the problem. Republicans have blocked doing a really big infrastructure bill. And the kind of money we're going to need for East-West Rail to get it right and make it work is going to take a significant investment. Remember when Donald Trump was president, how infrastructure
Yes, I do remember
was
that. It was
the
great.
punchline to a joke on late night television? And that was because you couldn't get the Republicans to come along and actually build up the kind of infrastructure we need. We've had underinvestment in infrastructure for years. Finally, in the 2 years that that Joe Biden was president and Democrats had control of both the House and the Senate, we got the biggest infrastructure package in history actually passed through. And that means we have started the money for building out the plans for East-West Rail. I know that Richie Neal is committed to this.
Talking about?
I am committed to this. We know the governor is committed to this. We're going to get the money together and we will get this done.
Mr. Deaton, you have 90 seconds to respond.
To the voter, during this debate and last debate, every time Elizabeth Warren speaks in her sentence, there's three things. There's a verb, there's a noun, and then there's Trump in it. And you're going to see that repeatedly. But on this specific issue, obviously, I believe this is very critical for Western Mass. And this is what it could do for the entire state, right? We have such a housing problem in Massachusetts. In Greater Boston, it's $980,000 for the median home price.
Jeez.
If you go statewide, it's $650,000. That's $200,000 more than the national average. So people are being priced out of the economy. In this state, we are now the second most expensive state to live in for working families. And I see incorporating Western Mass is a way to alleviate that. So yes, obviously it's going to come down to funding, but Senator Warren and I certainly can agree that we need to invest in Western Mass. Also, alternative energy, it's screaming here in Western Mass to be a part of the alternative energy, renewable energies, wind, solar, even a very small limited nuclear here in Western Mass. We could get hydro from Canada, maybe even go over the Berkshires and get it here. And that would create jobs and it would help the economy. So I'm all for it. We've got to do it. It would alleviate all kinds of issues, not just for Western Mass, but for the entire state.
Senator, you have 1 minute.
So I am glad to hear Mr. Deaton endorse East-West Rail. In fact, I want to hear everybody in Massachusetts endorse East-West Rail. And that's why I'm in the fight alongside Richie Neal to make sure we get all of our colleagues in Washington to sign off on this so we can actually get the funding for it. And part of the way we get that funding is when Democrats can stay in the majority in the Senate and in the House in order to get this done. But I want to hit something else that Mr. Deaton raised, and that is housing prices. Absolutely right. Housing prices are out of control. We've been sitting around for 40 years talking about how housing prices keep going up and up and up, and it has truly reached crisis proportions. It is time for the federal government to make an investment and to partner up. And that's why I have mayors all around Western Mass, including in Pittsfield, saying, I want to be part of that. The Warren plan is a plan to build more housing and bring down costs. Mr. Deaton's plan is to say, Let the private market fix it, like it's fixed it for the last 40 years.
Mr. Deaton, you have
Because
the
of
final
Democrat
30
rule.
seconds on this one.
Yeah, listen, the fundamental difference between Senator Warren and I is she believes that the government is the solution to all problems of society. And she believes that every issue, I'm surprised she didn't say, oh, we're going to fund it by tax the wealthy, because every single thing she says, climate change, housing, education, every issue is tax the wealthy, right? And she didn't say that, and I'm curious, but listen, the bottom line is the government is the problem most of the time. Builders are taking 2 years just to get building permits. We got to cut the red tape
Mr. Deaton,
and
that's time.
tax credits for those builders.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the issue of public trust. And Mr.
John's
Deaton, this is
crushing it.
for you. Because you haven't held elected office, we don't know much of your record. What we do know comes mostly from your book and the stories that you've shared publicly. One of them is regarding an incident involving one of your siblings where you misled law enforcement, knowing that you wouldn't be called to
Here's the
testify
liberal media.
against her as a Marine Corps prosecutor living in a different state. In your book, you
Here's
said,
the liberal
quote,
media.
although I lied to the cops, I wasn't under oath and I would never testify against my sister for something she didn't do. My question is, what should the public make of your willingness to break rules? And in this specific case, lie to law enforcement. Why should people trust you?
Well, listen, I would encourage all those voters to read my book, and they would learn that I come from extreme poverty, a single mother on welfare and food stamps, living in one of the single worst dangerous neighborhoods in America. My mother was stabbed when I was 6 in front of me. For 2 years, I was raped by a predator in the neighborhood. At 17, my best friend died in my arms from a drive-by shooting. And the first day of high school, I had a gun shoved in my mouth. So I was a high school dropout. And I got lucky. A principal of a tiny Catholic high school gave me a chance. And quite frankly, he saved my life. And he made me earn it. And I worked my way through high school and then at college and then law school here in Boston. And the Marine Corps chose me over all the other law schools to represent the Commonwealth. And for 27 years of active duty, and for 22 years, I've been representing working families. Senator Warren represents bankers. I represent plumbers, going against the biggest corporations in the world. And I've done it for cancer victims. I am a small business owner. I am a proud father of 3 daughters, and I am the American dream. And when you look at the Senate, you don't see someone like that. You don't see someone who's overcome poverty, someone who knows what the daily struggles of everyday people are. I do, and I think it's time we send someone like that to the Senate. My sister was OD'd twice. She was flatlined twice. I had a decision. Do I save my sister's life? And I chose that decision to save her life. And my sister texted me that I saved her life. Tina, how are you? I know you're watching. She texted me, John, I'm proud of you. You did a good job in the first debate. I'm the American dream. I know what it's like to struggle, and I will work for everyone that's watching this right now. I would dedicate my life to make your life better.
Time, Senator Warren, you have 90 seconds.
To do what?
I think this is a question of trust, and I'm glad you asked that question. You know, when John Deaton was arrested for assault at a kids' football game, the arresting officer came up and John Deaton told him to back off because he, John Deaton, knew all the judges. And when the officer decided that he was going to go ahead, put him in the car, take him downtown and book him, John Deaton told the officer that he makes so much money that he paid more in taxes every year than the police officer earned in his annual salary.
True.
I think there's a fundamental question here about who you can trust. And I think you can't trust someone like John Deaton with power. I appreciate that John Deaton grew up in a really poor family and under really difficult circumstances.
Oh, brother, here we go.
And I have some sense of what it's like to listen to your mother cry because she can't pay the bills and worried you're going to lose your housing.
Goodness.
But the question is, what do you take away from that?
What have you done?
For me, I'll tell you exactly what I take away from it. I've spent my whole life fighting for working families. John Deaton, I think we know the story. He takes care of himself first. Take a look at his tax returns. Worth what? Tens of millions of dollars, maybe $100 million. And he couldn't find more than $56 to give to charity across 2 years. There really is a question of who you trust to fight for your family or to fight for themselves. People of Massachusetts know me. They know I'm fighting for
They
them.
know you're full of shit.
Mr. Deaton, I want to give you a chance to respond, but I also want to remind you the question is, why should the public trust you?
the public should trust me. The same thing Vice President Harris said last night when she was interviewed, her life experience and my life experience. Listen, I'm an open book. I wrote a book and I explained all the problems, and I'm not going to get into that. I will tell you this, that the police just endorsed me after reading my book that Senator Warren referenced. I went before them and were questioned, and they agreed with me because the police had an arrest incentive program where they were arresting people based on the number of arrests. You were getting time off and you were getting money, and I sued them and I stopped that, and that practice ended. But here's the thing, Senator Warren, instead of looking at my life and saying, wow, that's a good example of someone who came from dirt poverty, who was raped as a child for 2 years, who saw his mother crawl on the ground and thought he was going to lose her at 6 years old, and watched my mother beaten over and over again. You would think she would say, you know what, that's good, but she's back to demonizing everyone. And Senator, let me tell you this. I've made mistakes in my life and I've owned them, but I've never claimed to be someone or something I'm not.
Mr.
Can you
Deaton,
say
that's
the
time.
same?
Senator
Can you
Warren
say the same?
gets
So,
the final 30 seconds here.
so let's be clear here.
Let's be clear.
This
Frank.
arrest at a kid's football game, when he told the police officer just how much he thought the police officer was worth, is not something that happened back in John Deaton's youth. It happened just not too long ago, living in Rhode Island. And what he did after he did this with the police arrested him and prosecuted him. He turned around and sued the police, and he lost that lawsuit. That's the part John Deaton doesn't. That's the part John Deaton does not want you to see. He is not someone
Character
we can trust.
assassination.
Senator Warren, that's time.
I have to.
And we're going to move on.
I need to
We're going to
address
move
that.
on.
Give me
We have
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
We have
please.
that
Is what
if
Senator
he
Warren
gets 10
said
seconds,
is
I'll
not
Senator-
true.
Mr.
It's not true.
Is that what
the
we're
case
doing?
is still
Mr. Deaton,
pending.
that's enough. Mr. Deaton, we need to move on. We
I'm
have a
just
lot
saying.
to get to. I understand
No, you don't
where you're
understand.
coming from, but
Liberal
we have to go to
media
the next question, which
bullshit.
is for Senator Warren. During an earlier debate this week, your challenger said that you were partially responsible for two hospitals, Kearney Hospital and Neshoba Valley Medical Center, closing. Two questions. How do you respond to these accusations, and what role did you play in trying to keep these medical facilities open specifically?
So understand why these hospitals closed. They closed because private equity came in and sucked $1 billion in value out of these, what originally had been not-for-profit hospitals. Think about how our nurses, what they could have done if that $1 billion had been reinvested in those hospitals. But they didn't. They took all of that out of the hospitals and basically used it to buy yachts and airplanes. Look, I am fighting to make sure that private equity does not eat out more of our healthcare system. Mr. Deaton's complaint is that I don't think we ought to have one more giant company come in and buy up our hospitals. We need to get this profit motive out of our healthcare system. And it's true for our hospitals. It is true for our pharmacies. It is true for our doctors' practices. It is true for our nurses, people who are trying to provide care. And keep in mind, if we end up with Republican control of the United States Senate, these are people who have tried over and over and over to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump says he's coming for it again. That will cost Massachusetts billions of dollars and result in more hospital closures here. We need to support our healthcare system, not tear it apart the way Mr. Deaton and the extremist Republicans want to do.
Mr. Deaton, you have 90 seconds. I'd like to ask you, what could or should the senator have done in this instance to keep these two hospitals open?
The first thing she should have done is stayed out of it, because listen, there was a deal on the table. United Healthcare was going to buy the hospitals. She objected to it immediately, just to object. And we lost Kearney and we lost Neshoba. Now pregnant women in central Massachusetts have to go 40 minutes to drive to give her birth because she wanted to fit her brand of going against companies. Just like when Amazon was going to buy iRobot, Senator Warren objected to it and said, I object, and hundreds of people lost jobs. She talks about trust. I hope that Senator Warren, she's talks about trust, yet she's proven to be corrupt in Washington. Senator, are you going to address the fact that she sits on the banking committee and Gary Gensler, who she's supposed to oversee and keep responsible, hold him accountable, she gave him not only the questions, but the answers to what she was going to say. She said, here, I'm going to ask you these questions under oath, and I want you to give these answers, okay? And then he did it. And then Senator Warren gets on TV and says, don't take my word for it. Gary Gensler said it. When she's the one that told him. That is corruption to its core. And Senator Warren's guilty. I prosecuted as a federal prosecutor under 18 USC 1622 suborning perjury cases. And I could convict Senator Warren like that on this. And I hope she addresses that, because Senator, you were a law professor. And I'm going to ask you, when you give the student the exam and the answers and then give that student an A, would that professor get fired?
Your minute, Senator.
So
Answer the question.
Healthcare, where this question
We're not going to
started.
deal with Gary Gensler?
Let's start with
Answer the
healthcare,
question,
where
which-
this started.
Exactly.
And that is that twice now, my opponent has alleged that United Health had offered to buy the hospitals. Those are not the facts. They offered to buy up the doctor's practice. The hospitals were out there loose and on their own. Go back and check the facts. But here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
Listen to what he says each time. What is the solution to the fact that our hospitals have been hollowed out by private equity? Bring in the 9th largest corporation in the world to just buy them up and squeeze more profits out of healthcare here in Massachusetts. What is the answer to every problem for Mr. Deaton? And that is bring in more people who can squeeze out more profits. He wants to talk about corruption. Let's use the 80, 90, 100 rule. 80% of Mr. Deaton's wealth is tied up in crypto. 90% of his funding for this campaign is coming from crypto.
Senator, that's
and
time.
100%
Senator,
of his
that's
loyalty in Washington
Mr. Deaton, you
will
have 30
be
seconds to
crypto.
respond.
That is corruption.
Senator, thank you.
It's just
Mr.
starting
Deaton.
out. Yeah, listen, you notice that she didn't even mention, I called her corrupt, and she wouldn't even address it. She won't address it. She won't address the Epstein stuff either. She just wants to kick it under the carpet and pretend that it didn't happen. Senator, I can tell you this. I come from extreme poverty. I made all my money that I've made. I made it before I went to Washington. What people are sick of are people like you going to Washington, D.C. broke, and then coming back 10 years later and being multi-millionaires. And so I don't think you should ever condemn anyone in the private sector who came from poverty and food stamps to make it be successful. And when you say I didn't donate, Senator, I sued the SEC. Yes. I won a Lawyer of the Year award,
Deaton,
Consumer Advocate of the Year, Freedom
Deaton,
of Defender
Pro
award,
bono.
because I did all that
Thank
work
you very
pro
much.
bono.
We need
That's
to move
called
on.
pro bono work.
Wait.
Something you did.
Senator,
He
Mr.
did
Deaton, we
pro
need
bono
to
work
move
for
on.
Crypto? Are you kidding
For
me
token
that
holders,
counts as a
small-time
charitable contribution?
That's right,
that you
76,000
abandoned,
bits.
that you
Senator
abandoned.
Warren, Mr. Deaton, we need to move along here.
Oh,
Staying
she's
on the issue of
mad.
health
She's
care,
mad.
Mr. Deaton, this goes to you. You have said you are the pro-choice candidate in this race, and you told our GBH colleague Katie Lannon in a recent interview that putting a bill on the floor that codifies Roe v. Wade would be a top priority for you if you were elected. You have also said, though, that you don't support late-term abortions, and that is part of the ongoing debate about what a federal abortions rights bill should and should not include, along with questions about fetal viability and religious objections for healthcare workers who don't want to be involved in abortions. Can you please describe what specific provisions you would include in a federal bill to codify Roe v. Wade that your Republican colleagues would vote for?
Well, I can't tell you whether the Republican Party colleagues would vote for it, but I can tell you what John Deaton would do, something that Elizabeth Warren hasn't done. She talks about it, but she doesn't do it. And what I would do is I'd look to Massachusetts. Massachusetts actually got this right, which gives a woman a right up to 22 weeks to have unrestricted access to abortion. After that period of time, she's not allowed unless it's for her health reasons or there's a fetal anomaly. And we're talking about the viability issue around that time. And so that's what I support. But listen, there are 6 people who are responsible for the overturning of Roe: Donald Trump, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, Harry Reid and Senator Elizabeth Warren. And right now I'm going to have my campaign staff, I want you to post the 2013 media advisory by Elizabeth Warren, where she bragged that she was going to push Harry Reid to get rid of the filibuster, even though they were told that Republicans would then use it for the Supreme Court. So you understand, everyone out there, that her fingerprints are all over this Roe decision. The Supreme Court would not look the way it does today if Senator Warren would have honored the fact that in the Senate, it takes hard work. The filibuster rule was in place for over 100 years, and it required compromise. But Senator Warren wanted to say, nope, I got 51. And by the way, she says she's going to codify Roe. You have 51 votes now in the Senate, Senator. So I would encourage you to do it. I'll help you write it if you
Mr.
want me to.
Deaton, that's time. Senator Warren, your response.
So this comes down to a question of trust. Can you really trust John Deaton?
Oh, here we go.
When he was asked who would he vote for Supreme Court, you know who he named? Gorsuch, one of the people who turned over Roe versus Wade, who vetoed Roe versus Wade, who got rid of Roe versus Wade. And what did we know about Neil Gorsuch at the time the vote came up? Well, we knew that as lower court judge, he'd done the Hobby Lobby opinion, which had restricted access to contraception. We knew that he had come from a list that had been pre-screened as people who would be anti-abortion. And we knew that 50 groups that support access to abortion had opposed Neil Gorsuch. And yet John Deaton says, you know, if I'd had that information, I would have voted for him. And now John Deaton gives us the big defense of the filibuster that keeps us from making Roe versus Wade law of the land. That's the problem. We can't pass it with 52 votes because the Republicans filibuster us. So here's the deal. If Republicans are in control of the Senate, there will be no bill to make Roe versus Wade law of the land. It doesn't matter whether we have 50 votes for it or 51 or 52. With Republican control of the Senate, we will have no bill to codify Roe versus Wade. And that means when they're coming for us in Massachusetts, we have no defense.
Senator, thank you.
That's
time.
Right? I get 30 seconds, right, on this one?
Yeah, you do.
Based on the
Thank you,
format.
John.
Listen, on June 22nd, 1 minute, thank you. In June of 2022, that's when the Dobbs decision came down. Joe Biden was president. They had the House, the Democrats had the House, and they had the Senate. They could have codified it, but Senator Warren didn't do that. She didn't go to the floor and say, I demand that every United States senator take a stand right now. You want to know why? Because they wanted it. Just like Donald Trump wanted immigration as an issue, they wanted it as an election issue for the midterms. And they didn't want to upset maybe Joe Manchin in West Virginia. John Deaton doesn't, I believe in term limits. So I don't subscribe to sitting back trying to maneuver how we can have control this day or that day, or I don't care if there's a senator in West Virginia, a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care about them. I care about Massachusetts. And so John Deaton was in the Senate. As a Republican, I would have stood up and I would have demanded every United States senator take a stand now. That's what advocacy is, not what Senator Warren's talking about.
So
Senator
Mr.
Warren, 30
Deaton needs
seconds.
to recheck his facts. We have voted on Roe versus Wade. And I stood up and said, we should vote on this. And the problem we have is because the Republicans filibustered it, we could not get to 60 votes. Yes, we put everyone on record, Democrats and Republicans, on where you are on Roe versus Wade. Mr. Deaton is just wrong. He just doesn't know what's happened here. But listen to him. When he defends the filibuster, what he's doing is saying, don't get anything done in the United States.
Senator Warren, that's time.
The filibuster.
Mr.
They had the vote.
Deaton, that's time.
They had the votes.
Moving on.
Exactly, John. They had the votes.
So for a moment, the two of you had radically different
Indian name
reactions
is
to a
Lion
pair of
Suck a shit.
decisions that were handed down this past year. The Chevron doctrine was overturned by the court. It had granted broad authority to regulatory agencies for decades, and the court found that presidents have absolute criminal immunity when it comes to exercising their core powers. Senator Warren, I'd like to start with you and then go to Mr. Deaton. Why do you think these two rulings are so dangerous?
Well, they're dangerous for two reasons. One is
please
that
enlighten us.
We don't need a dictator in this country. We don't want a
have one. His name's Joe
dictatorship. We
Biden.
founded this country because we didn't want a king. And yet this extremist Supreme Court has said that Donald Trump can do whatever he wants to do. And as long as he's president, they're not going to interfere, and the law can't interfere. We have a central principle in the United States, and that is no one is above the law. The Chevron doctrine, a little bit down in the weeds here, but the basic notion is that our agencies need to be able to do their work. So, for example, the Environmental Protection Agency needs to be able to set clean air standards. The Department of Education needs to set standards to make sure that our special needs kids are getting the services and help that they need. That's true throughout government. Department of Transportation does landing slots. And yet, what the Chevron doctrine used to do is it said that the courts have to defer. Maybe Congress didn't write down that the parts per million on how much mercury can be in air has to be 0.0003. We left it up to the agency. And what this Supreme Court is doing is they're saying, no, we don't want those agencies to function. We want to grind government to a halt and put all of the power with judges. We can't run our country that way. It will hurt us all.
Mr. Deaton, you cheered Chevron's reversal, and you said, I believe, that the reaction to the immunity ruling was premature, that we should wait and see how things played out. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, listen, remember when I noticed the agency that Senator Warren didn't bring up was the Securities Exchange Commission. Earlier, I just said that I literally looked her in the face and respectfully said that she's corrupt. Right? And this proves it. She had Gary Gensler, who oversees the Securities Exchange Commission, the chairman. She's supposed to hold him accountable. So what she did is, because she had a specific agenda in mind, she said, and this is proven by FOIA request, that here are my questions I'm going to ask you to an upcoming hearing under oath, and here's what I want you to say. And then she asked those exact questions, and he gave those exact answers, and they're not truthful. Then Senator Warren goes on CNBC and other stations and says, hey, don't take my word for it. Take the word of the regulator, the expert, who's Gary Gensler, who taught at MIT. They were her words. She told him what to say, and Chevron ended that. It ended the regulatory capture from senators that are like Senator Warren, who don't care about the truth, but only care about a specific agenda. I said, as a special assistant United States attorney in the District of Arizona, I prosecuted people under the suborning perjury statutes when you encourage someone to not tell the truth in an official proceeding. She is absolutely guilty of that, and it may seem harsh for me to say it, but it's the truth. And she didn't even respond to it. Maybe now she'll explain to America why that's not corruption.
Senator Warren, you got a minute, and then we go back to you, Mr. Deaton, for a minute.
So Mr. Deaton is just spinning this whole fantasy story. Look, my responsibility is oversight, and I want to make sure that we cover the issues that we need to cover. Nobody said anything that was untruthful, and Mr. Deaton has no evidence of that. But understand this, there's a reason that Mr. Deaton is very, very, very focused on the SEC. And the reason for that is the only agency that seems to have a little wedge on regulating crypto and has held these crypto multi-billionaires accountable when they go out and make wild claims about investments and how it's a great investment to buy crypto. Gary Gensler has been pushing back on that. We need regulations covering crypto. But when we've got the guy who follows the 80, 90, 100 rule, 80% of his value in crypto, 90% of his funding from crypto, and 100% of his loyalty from to crypto, it means that we're not going to have somebody who's going to support the SEC in trying to do their job.
Senator Warren, we have to leave your remarks there. Mr. Deaton, one more minute.
Yes, listen, I sued the United States government because they hurt small-time investors. And you want to know, it went viral. 75,000 individual token holders, not billionaires, people that have $5,000 invested, okay, $2,000 invested. They joined me. 627 of them here live in Massachusetts. And we sued the SEC, and I said that XRP token was legal. The SEC said it wasn't. And Judge Annalisa Torres, who was appointed by Barack Obama, agreed with me, cited my work, cited the affidavits that I submitted to the court, and ruled in my favor and said Deaton is right, basically. And it gave relief to these individual token holders. Now, she keeps talking about crypto billionaires. Senator Vice President Harris was just donated over 1 million XRP tokens by a crypto billionaire that supports me. So I'm going to ask you, what do the crypto people expect from Vice President Harris that they don't expect from me? That's what I'd like.
That is time.
May I answer that?
Oh, you
Yes,
may.
I have a question.
Very quickly, 15 seconds,
Donald
and then
Trump.
15 seconds to Mr. Deaton, and we're done.
I think it's a problem when any candidate receives 90% of the funding from their campaign from one industry, whether it's the crypto industry, the oil industry, the pharmaceutical industry. So far as I know, Mr. Deaton is now the all-time champion for having gotten the most funding.
Your time is up.
15 seconds, and we really have to move on.
Time is up. Absolutely lying. A super PAC. Senator Warren, I have $2 million. $105 is the average donation. I put $1 million of my own money in this race. She's talking about crypto billionaires or somebody who did a fund that's about her. She wanted to ban an industry, and so they
have to move on from this. That could go on for a while. Adam,
I have another question.
Has the next question
I have another question
on a different topic.
Thank you, Adam. I have another question for both of you, and this is part of our Connecting the Commonwealth initiative. And this question comes from our sister station CAI on the Cape and Islands. Massachusetts recently committed to New England's largest ever purchase of offshore wind power. At the same time, fishing groups and local communities have raised some concerns about impacts to our oceans and our coastlines. You'll both get an opportunity in this, Mr. Deaton. I'm going to start with you for 90 seconds. Two-part question. Where do you stand on the push to create an offshore wind economy, which has received significant federal funding over the last 4 years? And would you support the pause on offshore wind development demanded by opponents?
Yes, listen, this is a problem where people rush without actually thinking about how to do something. This comes down to where Senator Warren's wrong. She thinks the government is the answer to every solution, when I believe the government is usually the problem. And here's an example. They've created so many regulations that commercial fishermen here in Massachusetts have basically been bankrupt and put out of business. The Chevron decision that was talked about earlier dealt with a fisherman because the government, people like Senator Warren, said, hey, we're going to send someone on your boat and they're going to count how many fish you catch, and you're going to have to pay for it out of your own earnings, even though you're trying to support your family. That's insanity. And that's not how you approach things. And so we have to have renewable energy, in my opinion, has to be focused in the right areas. For example, I brought up Western Mass. I believe Western Mass is the prime place where we could establish renewable energy and revitalize this economy in the state. And that includes wind, that includes solar, that includes hydro. And like I said, it includes a limited amount of nuclear. And so I do support a pause at this point in time, because it's just like when the government said, here's $7.5 billion to build EV charging stations. After 3 years, they didn't have one online, and they've only got 7 right now, and it's $7.5 billion. In the meantime, Tesla in 1 quarter built 359 of them. So of course the private sector is better.
Senator, you have 90 seconds.
So we need to listen to our fishermen. We also need to listen to our native nations.
Native nations.
By offshore wind and offshore wind development. I think it's important that people be compensated. I think it's important that they be fully consulted. But I do not support leaning back on offshore wind. We are in a climate crisis, and offshore wind is one of the ways we're going to work our way out of that. Go down to New Bedford, go out to the Cape, and see the development that's coming from this. Look, this is a big difference between Democrats and Republicans. We don't have somebody here who says he's a climate denier, but he just doesn't want any of the things it's going to take to move us to a clean energy economy. I am very proud of the fact that I helped pass the biggest climate package in the history of the world.
Nobody wants.
And it was paid for by my 15% minimum tax on billionaire corporations that were paying little or nothing, corporations like Amazon. And that has resulted already, you can see it out here in Western Mass, 25 new electric school buses already that we have here. The resilience that we're building right now. This is a part of how we build a clean future. And understand this, I'm proud of what we've done, but it isn't nearly enough.
No, it's
we need
not.
to
That's
double
why you gotta
down
go.
on our
Thank you,
investments
Senator.
in climate
That's time.
again
Gosh,
and again.
Mr. Deaton, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Listen, Senator Warren does nothing but engage in class warfare. You notice that she keeps talking about billionaires. For example, she supported 87,000 IRS agents. And what was her answer? It's for the billionaires. Well, let's talk about something she doesn't like to, which are facts. There's 735 billionaires living in America. They have a cumulative wealth of $4.5 trillion. So Senator Warren, instead of just taxing them more, let's just take all their money for a second for this conversation. That 4.5 trillion that we take from them, you know what we could do with it? We could pay our interest alone for 4 years on the national debt. Not a dollar goes to education. Not a dollar goes to the climate change. Not a dollar goes to immigration reform. Not a dollar goes to anything. It just goes to interest. And so her slogan of tax the rich on everything is that's just a slogan. And by the way, the 87,000 IRS agents, if it was for the billionaires, we'd only need 735 of them, and they could be assigned to each billionaire all year long.
Thank you, Mr. Deaton. That's time. Senator, you have the final minute.
Oh my God.
So understand this, the
I'm
IRS
understanding.
agents he's talking about are the people who are hired to do enforcement against tax cheats who make more than $400,000 a year. And it is an
87,000.
incredibly successful program. In fact, for every dollar invested, we're getting somewhere between $6 and $10 back in revenues from people who just don't even follow the current law because they know under the Republican regime that the IRS doesn't have the manpower to come after them. Look, John Deaton stands here and tells you who he is. He wants to defend the billionaires, and that makes sense. It's the billionaires who are funding his campaign.
It's not
90% of the
Why would he
money
want to do that?
that is moving this campaign forward comes from the crypto industry. And the crypto billionaires are going to expect a big return on their investment if John Deaton can take this Senate seat.
Thank you, Senator. We have a little bit more to get in before we run out of time tonight.
Question for both of you involving political ambition. Senator Warren, if Kamala Harris is successful in her presidential run, would you consider serving in her administration? And if she is not, would you consider running for president again yourself in 2028?
No and no. I am asking the people of Massachusetts to elect me for a 6-year term, and it's the 6-year term here in Massachusetts that I want to serve. And the reason for that is because I have work that I'm doing for the people of Massachusetts, and this is my opportunity to get more of it done.
Sure.
You know, I got the endorsement from the Berkshire Eagle. Thank you very much.
Oh.
I sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and we lost our own Jake Gallagher. And I am working hard to hold the Department of Defense accountable for these ospreys so that other young people don't lose their lives. I've gotten $500 million into our local military installations, mostly in Western and Central Massachusetts. I brought home more than $20 billion, and it has touched every single community here in Western Massachusetts. We've gotten broadband. We've been able to support Soldier On for homeless vets up in Pittsfield, to support the Latino Business Development Group right here in Springfield that supports these young, getting started businesses. I've also been in the fight for climate, which is so important here. You know, I stood in Deerfield in the mud and the muck watching the latest
That's where you belong, in
flooding,
the mud.
and I hope everyone's sitting down. because I
Pocahontas in the
actually
mud.
work now with Ted
Senator
Cruz
Warren, I'm afraid
to
I
get
have
the
to
rules changed so
stop
that
you right
but let me
there.
at least explain.
Oh,
so
please,
that
let us
FEMA,
explain
Afraid I
it.
got to move on to
so
Mr.
that
Deaton.
FEMA
People
can
read about
actually
Pocahontas,
offer
zip
disaster
it.
collaboration with
relief for
Senator
these
Cruz. John Deaton, you have never held elected office before. Why are you starting off with a run for U.S. Senate as opposed to, say, running for a job
None
in
of your
the state
business,
legislature or even the Bolton Select Board?
Because we're in crisis. We have illegal immigration bankrupting the state. We have an opioid addiction killing Americans. We have a debt crisis. The government's going over a cliff. No one's talking about it. And we have inflation that's pricing Americans out of the economy. But the single greatest crisis we face is a crisis of leadership. You have people like Senator Warren, so divisive. They sit back and they fuel the division amongst us, and that has to change. You know, Senator Warren was asked a question about why is Trump so popular? Why is this race close? You know what she said? She threw her hands up in disgust and said, I just don't get it. I think it's your job, Senator, to get it, because 74 million Americans aren't racist and xenophobes. These are good people who think the country's headed in the wrong direction. And I realize, because I don't support President Trump, that maybe I'm the right messenger for these elites to get them to understand. So here you go. First, every member of Congress, take a look in the mirror, because you're part of the problem. And maybe people are tired of foreign wars. Maybe they're tired of working 50 hours a week and can't pay their bills, or being shocked at the grocery store when they get their energy bill, or that their parks are becoming crime scenes. Or maybe they feel betrayed, Senator, that they watch billions of dollars be spent on migrants who just got here, but we can't save Neshoba. We can't save Kearney. We don't have any for wildfires, and we don't have any for hurricane victims. Maybe they're in disbelief that in today's America, it seems far better to be an illegal migrant than a homeowner in North Carolina who's been here all your life.
Senator
Maybe
Warren,
now you get it, Senator.
30 seconds to
You
rebut.
don't get it.
Look,
Dumber than rocks.
You just heard John Deaton say he doesn't support Trump. And yet, less than a year ago, when he still lived in Rhode Island, he actually posted online that he would vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. He has said that he likes Donald Trump's
dog would vote that
policy
way.
better than he likes Joe Biden's. He has
I'll drop
said
out of the
that
race
You'll have
today.
30 seconds in a moment, John.
Can I have my time?
Please.
Reclaiming my time here. He has said that he likes Donald Trump's foreign policy better than he likes Joe Biden's.
True.
He has said that he
No
likes
wars.
Donald Trump's economic policy
True.
better than he likes Joe Biden's.
True.
And what is he now wants to come in front of the people of Massachusetts and just tell a different story.
Okay, 30
Look,
seconds to you, Mr. Deaton, to rebut, then we'll move
Senator
on.
Warren just looked you all in the face and lied through her teeth, just like she lied about her heritage, just like how she lied how she got into Harvard. She just now lied to you. I have been the biggest critic of Donald Trump than anyone. Go on my X account and search in Trump. It was published in the Boston Herald of all the things I've said, like you might be the worst human being alive and all of these things. Yet Senator Warren looks you in the face and just makes bold-faced lies. That's why I'm running, to answer your question, to replace people like Senator Warren who don't have a commitment to the truth.
Okay, let's leave that exchange there. We are near the end of the debate, and we're going to shift up the format a little bit, increase the pace, do a lightning round. I'd love quick answers from each of you on the same questions. Starting with you, Senator Warren, other than Springfield, what is your favorite spot in Western Massachusetts?
Jacob's Pillow.
John Deaton?
Pittsfield, because I think of my clients that I've represented that worked at the GE plant in Pittsfield that had mesothelioma, and I took on General Electric and got victims compensated. Pittsfield.
Okay,
and
I'm going to stay with you for a second.
Sure.
Name a political role model who is currently in office.
Currently in office, I like Amy Klobuchar, for example, because she's a moderate. By the way,
Senator from Minnesota.
Yeah,
okay.
I think she's a moderate.
Senator Warren, political role model currently in office.
You know, I give a lot of credit to President Zelensky, who has been on the front lines for 3 years.
Give him a lot of money too.
No crosstalk is allowed in this. President Zelensky is your selection.
That's
Thank
right.
you,
Someone
Senator.
You got to be shitting me. She chooses someone from another country?
Four in Massachusetts would legalize the use of some psychedelics. Senator Warren, do you support question 4?
Yes, but I want to say it's going to take a period to get into it, and we got to get the right regulations in place to make sure people are safe.
John Deaton, how about you?
That last question, I'd go with Nayib Bukele from El Salvador instead of Zelensky. But as relates to this, no, I vote no, because we got to deal with our opiate problem, with the fentanyl that's coming across this country, and they're pushing it too far, too fast. And so I'm a no on it.
You're a no on psychedelics.
Except for medical purposes by a doctor.
All right, both of you, like me, are transplants from elsewhere. What is one thing you really didn't appreciate about Massachusetts until you lived here? John Deaton, you first.
That I didn't appreciate?
That you did not fully appreciate until you actually lived here.
The seafood.
The seafood.
Because I worked at Legal Seafood for 3 years.
Senator Warren.
Oh, how beautiful the trees are in the fall. I grew up in a part of the world that doesn't have a lot of trees. And Massachusetts, especially out in the Berkshires,
was it on a reservation
magical.
there?
All right, I think final question for both of you. Senator Warren, what kind of candy are you going to be giving out for Halloween?
Mounds and some almond joy, if we can find it. Sometimes it's hard to find.
Oh my
God. All right, John Deaton?
Reese cups, unless I eat them all.
I was wrong. We have 30 seconds left. So I'll throw one more at you. If you don't win this race, what's your consolation meal going to be, John Deaton?
Probably chicken nuggets with my daughter Layla. This campaign has taken me away from her. Hi, honey.
Okay, Senator Warren, your consolation dinner?
It's probably going to be something at Frank's with French fries on the side. It's a great place in Cambridge. Try it out.
You can tell my mind is on food. It's getting late. That is going to close our debate. We want to thank the candidates, Senator Elizabeth Warren and John Deaton, for participating in this NEPM and GBH News debate.
Those eyes,
Thanks
man.
as well to our audience. Election Day is November 5th. Make sure you vote. Good night.
So there you have it, guys, in the books right there. Wow. In the books, second debate, some great lines in that, some great lines. Oh, hang on a second. Oh, took it too fast. They went and shook hands, and then he pushed her down the stairs. No, that didn't happen. So here we go. I'm just going to turn this sounds a little bit too much, but then they went back to their podiums and they went on for a longer debate, the after debate party. But that was it, guys. I mean, I don't know what to hear your thoughts. Let's talk about this. Let's workshop it a little bit. There are a couple of things that I wish would have been expressed, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was triumphed by Supreme Court judge who the left absolutely adores. When I say they adore her, she was like a god to them. And so when she passed, that was a big deal. That was a really sad missing. But one of the things she said was she thought Roe v. Wade was misguided, right? She thought it was wrong. And the whole idea, what most people miss, and this is how the left is always going to misconstrue this, but this is always a state's issue. The Supreme Court cannot make law. Laws are made in Congress. So what she's bitching about, the Supreme Court simply said, this is a state's issue and threw it back to the states. You're not going to have a bunch of judges dictate law and say that abortion's legal everywhere. That was never the question. So it was only Congress can pass that. And when John Deaton pressed her for the whole thing of going on and sort of getting that whole, he had said to her about the filibuster. Well, because they screwed the filibuster, it opened up the whole. The Democrats couldn't stop the Republicans, right? That was the whole thing with the filibuster. And Harry Reid, who's he's gone now, but he was out, Nevada, Democrat. He was the Speaker of the House, and he pushed for it, and he was warned, if you do this, it'll be great for the Democrats when we're in power, but when we're not in power anymore, it's going to come back to hurt us. And it did. And she's talking about 2013 border bills. What she doesn't realize is this border bill. Let's workshop this a little bit, guys, because I wanted to pull this up and explain to you what this border bill that you keep hearing in this debate is all about, because there's a lot of untruths that are being talked about. Let me stop this. Let me start sharing my screen again here. But I wanted to sort of like zero in on this a little bit. There we go. Let's go look at this a little bit. So here you have it right here. You've got this. This is Byron Donalds put this out. He was commenting last night on the whole thing that came up. The border came up again, but here's why the border deal failed. Number one, it was codifying catch and release. What does that mean? It makes it part of law that you can absolutely, anybody that's caught, found out to be illegal, you release them. Right now, it's simply, I think, an executive order, but you basically write that into law saying that anybody you catch, oh, you're illegal, release them. That's a bad thing. It let in 1.8 million illegals, 5,000 per day. It could scale up to 8,000 per day. It would go ahead and fund sanctuary cities. Massachusetts, Boston is a sanctuary city. San Francisco, if you've been there lately, it's a hellhole. It's a sanctuary city. And this sanctuary city means that if you're illegal, you're caught, you just simply stay there. Hey, you want a house? You want free room and board? Sure, why not? There's another problem. It would fund NGOs moving illegals. Now, what that means is we're already seeing a lot of those freebies and give outs are done by NGOs that are based outside the United States. You know, these cards they give them that have $8,000 and $10,000 on it. These are what the NGOs are fighting. It would provide lawyers to illegals. You can't get a lawyer for some dispute with your HOA, but they're going to get a lawyer being illegal, coming in here illegally, and it would provide free lawyers to illegals. It would give work permits to illegals, which meaning that it would take jobs from Americans. It would take nothing to deport. There's nothing in that bill to deport illegals. It said no language at all. So what kind of border bill is this really? No immediate wall funds. So let's not stop the problem. Let's just let more. All it did, what it really was a border deal. It was a freebie thing. It wasn't even anything to do with the border. It was like allow them come in, catch and release, sanctuary cities, and there was no asylum screening. So that was like there's no asylum screening now. This border bill was a lot of words that did nothing, and it gave $60 billion to Ukraine. So I like what John said today about Ukraine. I love how he absolutely pressed her on the whole Ukraine issue, and how he said that like you have to earn my vote. Now, I don't consider a country a democracy when you're the president, Zelensky, and you say there's an active war and you put off the election. That's not a democracy. It is a democracy, really, because it's mob rule, right? It's majority rules. But this is what a democracy always basically devolves into: dictatorships, right? When you get rid of the news platform, right, and you turn them all into state-run media, that looks like a dictatorship. So you're telling me the United States is funding a country that the president just decided to ban the election was supposed to happen, I think, in the fall. But that never happened because, there's an active war. There can be an active war here, and you know what's going to happen? An election, right? Because we're a constitutional republic. We're governed by our Constitution. That's our document, and it protects the minority. It does not, a democracy. It's just mob rule, right? So this whole thing of that, there was a couple other John Deaton lines in there too that he got into. He also brought up, it was kind of light, but he brought up her line about her ethnicity, basically calling her a fake Indian and a really low. She wouldn't answer the question about Gary Gensler. Openly said, hey, and if I'm watching this debate and I live in Mass, I'm like, really? Let's see, did she do that? Well, yeah, ABC reported on it. People exposed her. She's like, you have no evidence of that. It was all over the news. We have emails on it. That's was a Freedom of Information Act. We got the emails to know that she actually did that. Wasn't like we just guessed about it. So this whole thing, this woman is weak. And all I can say is I hope a lot of people have actually watched this, because if they watch this, I absolutely 100% believe that John Deaton will crush and win this race. And it's a pivotal type of a year. I know some people are upset that he doesn't support Trump. That's fine. Doesn't matter. We need somebody in there. And again, I differ with John on that too, right? But if you look at John's platform, it's pretty much MAGA, right? It's borders. He's not into the whole Ukraine thing. So it mirrors it pretty closely. You got to remember where he's running. We're not going to agree on everything, but for you to say, look, he doesn't support Trump, so I'm not voting for him. You live in Mass and you don't vote for John, and you allow someone like Elizabeth Warren, you're the problem. So, are you going to agree with everybody? I don't agree. I'm a registered independent. I don't like most Republicans, period. I can have an axe to grind there. John has his own personal axe to grind, right? If he doesn't like Trump, so what? He doesn't like Trump. Big deal. Will he vote with Republicans on a lot of things? Probably 70% more than Elizabeth Warren will. So I think that's a weak argument. I do think that in order for us to really stand up, if you can't make it to Massachusetts, you live in the United States, look, give $5 to John. He needs these ads. If you saw his latest ad, it's fantastic. It does a really good job of painting who he is in 30 seconds. I think what we have to think about with John Deaton is if we can help him and support him, and I've been a big supporter of his, I've given financially, and the funny thing is I don't do that to many candidates. I don't think I've really given to many candidates, maybe presidential races, but never anybody that wasn't running in a race, because I believe in who John Deaton is. I believe he's going to do the right thing, despite what I may have some minor disagreements with him. It doesn't matter. It's all about John Deaton winning. And also, too, he's going to stand up. And if he wants to put something forward, you know where he stands. We don't know anywhere where Elizabeth Warren stands. She's wishy-washy. He got right in her face and asked her questions. You gave the regulator, who you're supposed to be holding accountable, and he talked about what statute he would be able to prosecute under. And then he asked her a simple question. You used to be a law professor. Would you expect to give the exam to the student and then think that's okay? It's really telling a couple times during this debate, if we go back and watch it, where sometimes when people get really nervous, they'll smile, they'll snicker a little bit. Caught her a few times, because a lot of times when you're lying and you know you got caught, you're going to smile too. It seems weird, it seems awkward, but that's exactly what's going to happen. So you're going to have these scenarios where you might just smile a little bit. Caught her a couple times, man. He brought up the Epstein again, right? He brought up a bunch of stuff, and the whole thing with the Gensler thing, she can't answer it. Look, here's what we're gonna do, right? Here's what it is. I thought it was another phenomenal performance by John Deaton. I have to say that I feel like he's really coming to his own. Whoever's working with him or giving him training, they're doing a great job. He was very well prepared. He did his homework. Now, if you notice, Warren came prepared because she had a list. Look, here's all the things I did. I did this, I did that. She had to read it off a list. If you did those and those were in your heart, you don't need a list. Do you need a list to know what you did at your job for last year? No, I would ask you a question. Hey, man, what'd you do this year? Well, here's a few things we did. I did this, right? You would nail them off. You would know exactly what you did. She needs a list? Are you kidding me? It's so disingenuous. She needed a list to read off. Well, I did, it sounded so pandering to me that she did all this stuff. And I brought $500 million back and this and that. Meanwhile, John nailed her again in the hospitals, right? 2 hospitals went away. United Healthcare is going to go in there and purchase them, but she stepped in. Oh, no, we can't have somebody. Meanwhile, they would have saved that, which she doesn't understand because she's never had a small business. She's never been in business. She's just sucked off the teat of government. She thinks the teat of government's the answer. And just like Ronald Reagan said, the 7 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? The government is never going to be the answer. John nailed another great point talking about private sector. Private sector in relationship with the government. Look at someone like Elon Musk. $6 billion was allocated to put broadband across the country to people that don't have broadband access, right? $6 billion. 2 years later, 0 were done. You know who was originally contracted to do that? A guy named Elon Musk. The guy that lands rockets back into the biggest rocket that's ever flown into an arm that comes down and catches it. That guy, that dummy who doesn't know anything. So you think about that guy been tasked to do it. $6 billion would have been spent. We would have had broadband everywhere. But no, they can't, because they can't give it to a guy who purchased a free speech platform. So he lost that contract. Meanwhile, 0's been done. So all this gaslighting that you hear by Elizabeth Warren, you hear it by Vice President Harris. It's a lot of gaslighting. It's like, look, man, we've been living this for the last 4 years. And if you don't live in the U.S., there's so much influence, unfortunately, from the U.S. around the world that people everywhere are like, hey, okay, bring Trump back. We know. Is he going to be a dictator? That's weird. He walked away last time, right? He's been sitting on the sidelines. They're worried about coming after your opponent. Who came after their opponent? Try to throw Trump in jail. So there's a lot to be said. So much more to unpack about this. I really wish Jeff was here to kind of workshop this. Jeff is not here, so I have to do all the rambling myself, but I want to thank everybody here for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I just had to get a couple of things off my chest there, and I wanted to say that everybody, that let's just keep the fight. If we can support John in any way we can, let's support him. If it's $5, and I know things are tough, but he also accepts crypto. You got a little bag somewhere you can part with. You got a couple XRP you might be able to part with. John accepts crypto. Let's see what we can do to help him. Obviously, you have to live in the U.S. if you're going to donate to his campaign, right? That's just those are the rules. So we don't want to break any rules, but I'm saying if you live in the U.S. and there's a way that you can make a donation to him, I think that helps. It gets his name out there, because I think if people in Massachusetts know who John Deaton is, John Deaton crushes Warren. He destroyed her in this debate. She's never seen a worthy opponent. And John it was almost embarrassing. And you almost felt a little bad for her because she struggled. Now, I bet you she was doing her homework the last 2 days. We haven't seen her tweeting that much over there on X. She hasn't been putting stuff out, but she got her ass handed to her. Pocahontas, the fake Indian, got punched in the throat time and time again. She came up with a big loss. And I think the people of Massachusetts, I love the fact that it made a lot of national news because not a lot of people know who John Deaton is nationally. This race hasn't gotten a lot of attention. I do feel like if John Deaton was a big Trump supporter, how would the people of Mass look at that? But if he was, he probably would have get a lot more money. John's out to win a race. He wants to do it his way, and I support that. And again, like I said, we're not going to agree on everything, but who's the guy that's going to go to Washington? He's for term limits. He'll be the first guy. John Deaton wins this thing. His very first bill will be term limit bill, right? And you'll hear everyone bitch and complain. And isn't that funny that the elites, the people who suck, because he said that again, that they're do nothings, the people who suck the most will be absolutely, they're not going to vote for their demise. Hey, do you want to vote for hey, there's a firing squad over there. Do you guys want to vote for it? Sure, put me down for yes. No, they're not going to vote for it. So anytime term limits comes up, but it has to be a time, look, 2 terms. Someone like Senator Warren, she ran 2 terms. She's been there 12 years. Now, the sad part of a senator, and I think they should change this too, is if you're in the House of Representatives, like someone like a Warren Davidson or a Tom Emmer, you have to run every 2 years. If you're in the Senate, 6 years, and after the first term, you're fully vested, meaning you'll make $230,000 the rest of your life, no matter what you do. You could end up, injecting yourself with needles and fentanyl on the side of the road. You'll still collect your $230,000 a year, or whatever it is. I'm not going to quote me and come back and say, "Oh, Chip, it's not 230, it's 226." They just voted themselves a raise last year, so I don't know. It's like $50,000 additional. It used to be 275, but there's an extra 50K in there that goes to housing that's not officially on there. So yeah, when they get a chance to vote the best healthcare for them, not the healthcare you get, no, they get the best healthcare. And so those are politicians on both sides of the aisle, and that's where John is absolutely right in saying you suck. So I want to thank everybody. That's it. If I keep going, I'll ramble. But good night, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Take care. Jeff will be back probably in about another week and a half. Another week and a half, we'll be back. Yep, that's right, Chip. You can't be pro-Trump in Mass. He's got the right ideas and views. He's a normal, practical guy, not beholden to DC. Yeah, and that's the one thing that I can really respect and get behind, right? We're not going to agree with everything. I can tell you, 95% of the Republicans I don't deal with. Got John Deaton. I like where he's going and what he believes in. So that's all we got. I will leave it at that. Thanks, Top Marks. Appreciate you, Chad. Thank you very much, guys, for coming in. And there's going to be no show on Saturday because I'm going to be visiting family, and I think he'll probably be back Sunday night, and then we'll jump all into whatever the flavor of the day is, whatever happens the next couple of days. We'll be workshopping that. We'll tie it into the whole crypto decentralization conversation and geopolitical. So we'll do all that and more. So guys, we'll see you on the next one. Chip out.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.